but we're sure you're going to be happy you joined us, because today we're going to be talking about research and note-taking. And we've got some really good strategies that we want to share with you on how we can bring our students' writing to the next level. So the first thing, I'm joined here by my colleague, Diane Lazar. She and I will be presenting this concept with you today. And feel free, if you have any questions, to chat them in the chat box. One of us will answer them as we're moving along here. So objectives for today. First of all, we're going to start out by introducing the golden bricks. So for those of you who are not familiar with empowering writers, these are very specific, powerful details what we teach our students, so that when they are writing informational writing, how can they up the ante of the quality of writing? So we're going to talk about the use of golden bricks in research. So even though it's a skill that comes up in elaboration and how do we get kids to elaborate more, it is the same skill that they're going to take to research. So we're going to take a look at that. It's also important that as we talk about research, that we also talk about and introduce note-taking strategies. So as kids are learning to gather information, how do they productively take notes so that they can apply the information into their work? And also, we're at the very end, we're going to talk a little bit about ways in which we help our students take those notes and really develop them into their own words. And then we're going to keep in mind research opportunities across the curriculum. So the work that we're doing today is not limited to your writing time. There's going to be lots of opportunities for you to be able to use research and note-taking strategies in all of your content areas. And we're going to be making those connections as we move through the content today. So the first thing that I want to share with you is really, we're just going to stop for just a moment and talk about what is a golden brick, because some of you who are not new to empowering writers may not be familiar with it. The next several slides that you see are actually part of what we call our skill PowerPoints. And if you happen to be a Hub user, you'll notice that within the Hub, we have skill PowerPoints. These are PowerPoints that are developed to help guide your instruction. So we actually have them as single slides right now, but when you're in the Hub, you will see these PowerPoints, and we just clipped a few of them that we want to share with you, but you would be able to project this for your students. So an effective way to show rather than tell is to use powerful details. If you look at our expository informative pillar, which is what we use for expository writing, you'll notice that within the body of the piece, we have several main ideas supported by details. For those of you who are new to empowering writers, I always want you to think of our pillar as an accordion. And what do I mean by that? We are not limited to 3 paragraphs. We can do 6 paragraphs. We can do 1 paragraph. That pillar can stretch and condense based on the topic and the needs, and certainly our student writing abilities. So the pillar is the organizational framework that we use. It's the structure that our students use to write informational writing. And you'll notice that within the pillar, those main ideas are supported by details, and a couple of those details within each main idea is golden. So those are what we call golden bricks. And after our students understand organization, and they understand broad yet distinct main ideas, and they understand detail sentences, we actually go up a little farther and we encourage them to include golden bricks. And let me show you what some golden bricks are. There's actually several golden bricks. 3 of them are specifically research based. So authors are going to research to enhance their writing and to make a more powerful impact on their reader. And so the research-based golden bricks are the quotes, the statistics, and the amazing facts. So let me show you how we utilize this within the context of research. Oftentimes teachers will say, well, can they just make them up? And the answer is going to be no. We're not going to have our students make up the statistic, a quote, or amazing fact. They're going to find them through the process of research. And actually, it can be done quite simply. So let me show you how I might help my student. So imagine my student is writing a paper about Martin Luther King. And one of the details within the body of the piece says, Martin Luther King Jr. was an inspirational speaker. What I might say to my student is, wow, that's really good information. I want you to prove that. Provide some evidence. Could you go and research an example of how he was an inspirational speaker? And so now what I'm asking my student to do is to probably go find what from Martin Luther King? Probably a quote. So how do they go about doing that? Really, quite simply, and I would actually model this in my classroom, is I would show them how they're going to go about finding that. And what they're going to do is they're going to put Martin Luther King Jr. quote right in the search bar. And then they're going to search, and let's see what comes up when that happens. Martin Luther King Jr. is quoted as saying, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." So if my student took the Martin Luther King sentence, that he was an inspirational speaker, and coupled it with what Martin Luther is quoted as saying, what he's done right there is bumped up the quality of their details. And you can do the same thing with an amazing fact, and you're going to do the same thing with a statistic, depending upon what sentence you're looking at and how much detail you want to add to it. So that's how we use the golden brick. First, you have to ask yourself, what can I do to make the detail more powerful? So that's what we encourage kids to do when they write details. We always say, okay, we want you to give us more to that. So one thing to do is to look at what it was. So certainly for Martin Luther King, it makes sense to include a quote. If we were talking about life cycles, we might find something about amazing facts that we want to include, or a statistic if we were talking about something in math or science. So there's lots of ways in which we can use those golden bricks. The other kind of golden bricks that exist that are not research-based are the anecdotes and the descriptive segments. And they know how to do that from narrative writing. They know how to write a short little anecdote or a descriptive segment about their topic. Those come from personal experience. So those don't require research. And the answer to that is, can they make them up? And they can. So those they're going to bring from their own personal experience. And the other three are going to be based on research. So first thing I want you to think about is that when we have kids research, they're going to go to the skills of golden bricks, which they're familiar with when we've been working in informational writing. And one of the things that we really like to do with our students is exactly this, is to show them how they can create what we call these golden bricks based on the different types. So you have statistic, amazing fact, and a quote. So those three are research-based. And what we encouraged kids to do was to look at articles and find examples of those in those articles. Remember that reading, writing connection is always going to be inseparable. So here they're reading with author's eyes and they're finding examples of those golden bricks. And when they get into research, they're going to use those same exact skills to be able to find the information they need and to drop it into their generative writing. So I'm going to actually ask Di to turn it over to you now and talk a little bit about how the same skill that we use in generative writing, which is what does it look like, why is it important, we can also use as a basis for research.
Thanks, Taya. So one of the very most basic skills, research skills, is using our observational tools, right? By just looking simply at images, we can often just determine lots of information. So if you look at the birds here, they are all different kinds of birds, and we're going to study their beaks. And there's a great book called Beaks by Sneed B. Collard III that I love because it just basically takes us through what all of those beaks look like. And not only what they look like, but then why are they important? So when we look at these different types of beaks, we see the toucan has a colorful beak, but look at the shape of it. There's a reason why that beak is shaped exactly that way. Same thing with the pelican and the eagle. And so as students begin to observe, that's their first step in research. We want them to use that observation skill. And those of you who teach science know that that's one of the most important things as a scientist, right? We're going to start by just observing. But then what happens is once we get some information by our observations, oftentimes we don't know why something is important. So for instance, I observe that the toucan has a hooked beak. It's fairly large. I observe that the eagle's beak is shorter, and you can see the little hook up on top. But here's the reality. I don't know why. And that's what happens, is that why is it important really leads us into some research. So let's do a little research. Here's an observation. This is our pelican. And what happens is, after observation, what are you wondering? So this is what it looks like. Fish-eating birds have large, long, and strong beaks. Some even have large pouches. So as a strategic reader, I can identify this as the what does it look like? That's what the author is sharing with me. Now, what I'm expecting to see as the paragraph continues is the why is it important? So why is it important that these fish or these birds have large pouches? Fish-eating birds such as pelicans, albatrosses, and seagulls have long, curved beaks to catch fish and then prevent them from escaping. The pouch on a pelican's beak helps it take huge gulps of water to store the fish in it. Herons and cranes have long, strong beaks to catch fish. That's why it's important. So notice that when we're starting with research, and we start with those observations, what we're asking kids to do is just take some notes. What do you observe about an image, about this particular image? Now, because we don't always know the why is it important about it, that's going to lead us to our research. And of course, when we get into our research, here's what happens. I don't know about you, but my kids tend to write everything they see. So they're literally, instead of taking notes, they're literally going to write the entire paragraph over again. And that's when we have that conversation about plagiarism, and we need to talk to them about how to take a note. So let's go through our note-taking skill, because that's really what research is. It involves gathering information. It's not enough to read it and write it exactly the way the original author wrote it, but now we have to do something with it. So we have a strategy, and just so those of you who have our informational guide, either in a printed resource or in the hub, which is our digital resource, all of this information that we're sharing today, the part that we're in right here, comes from section number 4, and that's our research section. So you're going to find our note-taking strategy and our golden bricks right within that section. And there's a series of lesson plans for you. It starts with observation and then moves into this type of note-taking. If you teach in a younger grade, like 2nd or 3rd grade, instead of teaching a very specific type of strategy, we really teach students how to recognize and record keywords. That's really their job in 2nd and 3rd grade. As we move into the upper grades, however, we want to teach them a little bit more of a sophisticated strategy. Here's what we do. We teach them how to use a dash, and the dash means defined or explained as. And then we use a slash, and the slash means and or. So let's take a look at how that works. Here is a simple sentence. And what I love about what we're going to show you here, so often we hand students like the entire article and say, okay, go take notes on it. But you know, that's a lot of information. What I really want you to be able to do is take a step back and think about it. Let's learn how to take a note with one sentence. That's going to be important. So here we're learning about earthquakes. And here's what the original text says this. Earthquakes cause the earth to shift even underwater. This can cause a tsunami. So let's think about how our note might look. Our keyword is what? And in the chat box, you can just chat the keyword to me. What would the first word of our note be? What is this all about, this sentence? It's all about, maybe we can't type that. There you go. Earthquakes. That's the first part of our notes. Well, let's use a dash now. How does the author explain earthquakes? What would be the next portion of this particular note? Earthquakes, what do? You could type that. Yeah, shift the earth, or the earth shifts. Excellent. And then the author goes on to explain and what happens when the earth shifts The next part of the note causes a tsunami. Excellent. So this is exactly what the note would look like. Earthquakes, earth shifts / tsunami. So when we're taking a note, we're just going to practice it. Remember, at Empowering Writers, our methodology is always introduce students to a skill, model that skill, and then allow students to practice. But we try to isolate that skill and give them only what they can manage. And that's what you're seeing here is just that one sentence. So I'm going to give you a chance to try that. Here is another sentence from a different text. Now we're learning about volcanoes. How about you take a note based upon this particular sentence? And in the chat box, just chat the way your note might look. Start with the keyword, dash to define, / to add more information. Excellent, Helen. Volcanoes, cone-shaped landform, lava and smoke erupt. Perfect. Anyone had something different? Yeah, there you go. Volcano landform. I like that, Lisa, with a vent, lava and smoke. Perfect. And remember, there's a chance that it might be 2 dashes. Sometimes that happens in a sentence. You might find that, or you might just find a / and not a dash at all. So there's no magic formula to this. I know that what you're seeing here kind of looks like it. Volcano, then we're going to explain it, and then we're going to add a little more information. But sometimes that doesn't work exactly the way you see it here. So all of you definitely got that one particular piece. So one of the things that you think about is students are often put into contact with a text, and so they have to take the note from the text. But what about the fact that sometimes they're taking notes from a lecture or a video or a talk or a podcast of some sort, and they don't have the text in front of them? Guess what? This very same strategy is going to help them to listen and key in to what? The key notes, right? The key words of the lecture, the talk, the podcast, or the video. And students can use this very same strategy with a video or anything that's an oral lecture. So I want to share with you one of our videos. We've talked a little bit about the hub, and this is a virtual field trip. We're going to take you on a field trip all about volcanoes, and you're going to hear a little bit of information. Let's see if you can take a note based upon the video information. There is some text in the video that'll help you too. And I am going to have to fast forward it a little bit, so hang in there with me.
In a few minutes, you will be volcanoes on the ocean floor, and main idea number 3, volcanoes on other planets. Volcanoes. Volcanoes are landforms where molten rock breaks through the surface of the earth. Molten rock, lava. Volcanoes around the world. Mauna Loa. Location, Hawaii. Height, 13,000 feet. Mauna Loa, 13,000 feet. The Empire State Building, 1,454 feet.
So as an experience of taking notes, the difference between having the text right there in front of you and having either an oral lecture or a podcast or a video really kind of bumps up the fact that kids have to pay attention. And if you tried to take a note from this video, I'm sure it was a little bit more difficult for you. So good news is you can always use these kinds of videos for this work. We've embedded all of our virtual field trips within our informational guide, and you can use that to practice that kind of note taking, because I know sometimes they have to do something that's a little bit more oral in nature. Daya, you want to take us through that?
Sure. So now what happens is this, right? Kids take notes, and I have to confess that I do too, especially anybody who works with me knows I take notes sometimes on napkins. And then I have to actually understand my notes. So let's work backwards and see if we can help students to read their notes and put them in complete sentences. So the way that Diane had explained it, where we have a keyword defined as, and then added more information. So now we're going to remind our students of that, and we're going to look at what we can give them so that they can take these notes and expand the thought. A cone-shaped landform is called a volcano. At the top of a volcano is a vent where lava and smoke come out as it erupts. So what did we do there? We added the detail. We made them into complete, yep, you put the information in between your dashes and the slashes. Good job, you filled it in. You created complete sentences. What would be helpful for students to have when they're working on this? What might be helpful if we provided them? So certainly when we're working on a topic like this, if we were studying volcanoes in science and we were going to have them take notes on the topic, one good thing would be pictures, absolutely, models always. Made sentences, exemplars, how about sentence starters as well? So before they start to do this, we can give them the sentence starters. And watch what happens with the sentence starters, referring back to the article that they read. The author explains that a cone-shaped landform is called a volcano. At the top of the volcano is a vent where lava and smoke come out as it erupts. Now, what I could do is I could actually change this a little bit more. I could probably even use a word referent. How else could I refer to come out as it erupts? So again, another skill that we have for reading and for generating writing is all about creating word reference. What's another word for come out?
There you go. Henry's got it. Spews.
Spews. Oh, good one. Yep. So at the top of a volcano is the vent where lava and smoke spews as it erupts.
Pours out as
Pours.
it erupts.
Oh, good one. That's a good one.
Mm-hmm. Explodes as it erupts.
So always helpful. And I know this comes up a lot with people who ask us, how often do we give them sentence starters? And you know what? We always provide sentence starters because it helps. And when they don't need them anymore, they won't use them. They'll come up with their own. But initially, when we're teaching them to take notes and to frame up their sentences in certain ways, it's helpful for them to have these sentence starters.
The sentence starters also help them to cite the evidence, if you think about it, right? So those of you who work in some response to text, some of these sentence starters are really helpful to help kids to be able to cite the evidence when they find it.
And those cite the evidence sentences, the article goes on to note, the author explains. In chapter 2, we learned, those are all phrases we give kids to show them how, in fact, they've pulled the evidence from the piece. Okay, so now it's your turn. Let's write a complete sentence about these notes. So the topic, because you need to know what the topic is, characteristics of living things. And here are the notes. Have cells, dash, building blocks of life. Can you use those sentence starters in conjunction with the notes and the topic and create a sentence? And you could just type that right into the chat. Again, we want our students to practice that looking at notes. How do I work backwards? Now I've taken the notes. Now how do I create those sentences?
Good. Did you know that living things have cells, which are the building blocks of life? Excellent. Good job, Sarah.
Did you know that all living things have cells? The author explains that they are the building blocks of life. Good job. Interestingly, all things have cells, which are building blocks of life. One interesting fact is that living things have cells. Cells are the building blocks of life.
So I want to kind of push you a little bit further. I see the word cells came up in many of your sentences. What else might you call a cell? What is a cell? Can you come up with what we call a word referent to replace the word cell? It's hard. It's pushing you a little bit. Yeah, matter.
But it's pushing me a little bit too.
That's okay. What else is a cell? Yeah, Barb, nice job. A simple organism.
There you go.
I was just about to type something like that right in there. A simple organism.
So if you go back to Jess's sentence, one interesting fact is that living things have cells. Cells are the building blocks of life. We could actually say one interesting fact is that living things have simple organisms. Cells are the building blocks of life.
Good.
The smallest units of life.
Good.
The other thing I just want you to think about is as you typed in those sentences, was it helpful to have sentence starters? When you look at those notes and say, okay, so as the adult writers look at it and say, oh, these sentence starters really help. Imagine if we gave them to our students on a regular basis, and then we could see how they help actually pull all that whole thought process together so that we can generate a sentence that really works well. And notice, like Diane said a few minutes ago, we are just working on one sentence. This is how we practice the whole idea of note-taking first in isolation before they really dive into more in-depth text. So here's what we're going to do now. And I'm going to turn this over to Di. And you'll notice that we have in your own words. So here's one of the problems that happens when we're teaching kids to do research. We all know that they find information and they literally lift it off the page and drop it into their papers, which walks the fine line with plagiarism. So how do we teach kids to be able to take information that they need and translate it into their own words? And what's really interesting is these skills they have, because we've been working on it in both writing and in reading. So Di, would you want to take us through that?
Sure. So let's return to our bird example. We're going to go back to those fish-eating birds, such as pelicans, albatrosses, and seagulls, have long curved beaks to catch fish and then prevent them from escaping. So when we're teaching kids to put these kinds of things in their own words, remember, the first thing we do is we teach them how to take some notes. So how do we take a note on this sentence? Fish-eating birds, long curved beaks, which means no escape, right? So what did we just learn? We learned how to add a sentence starter. So in the end, what starts to happen is students are able to begin to synthesize all of the work that you've done before getting to this note-taking strategy. And here's what I mean by that. Early in the resource and early in your instruction, you're going to teach students how to use sentence starters. Lots of different kinds of sentence starters. We use a lot of them at Empowering Writers all the time. So that's the first thing they're going to do. Then the second part of learning how to write information is using what we call the detail generating questions that we saw earlier. what does it look like? And why is it important? So they're going to be able to include that in this particular piece as well. Finally, we're going to teach them how to use a word reference, which we just saw with our cells, and another strategy that we call flip the sentence subject. Now, the strategy called flip the sentence subject takes divides the sentence between the subject and the predicate. We take the back side of the sentence and move it forward. That's how we flip the sentence subject. And what that does is it helps us to paraphrase. So in order to paraphrase something, we teach kids how to develop word reference and to flip the sentence. So let me show you, and by way of color coding this, it's probably the best way to show you how this works. The author states, there's our sentence starter, the long curved beaks, that's what it looks like, of fish-eating predators. Now, up here in the original, it called it a fish-eating bird. We're going to call it a fish-eating predator. So it just changes it slightly, such as pelicans, albatrosses, and seagulls prohibits their prey from getting away. So the word prohibit, what did we do? Well, we took the word prevent and we found a synonym for it, right? Then instead of saying the fish, we called the fish the prey. And instead of using the word escape, we used the word getting away. So what you see here is that because we were able to synthesize all of this learning, students are able to then take this kind of note and really place it within their own words because we've given them all the tools that they need. And each one of these tools is a skill. There's lesson plans for every single one of them, and it's a skill that must be taught in isolation, just the way Dea and I are working this with you today. Does anyone have
any questions on that? Because we layered a lot in on that part.
Oh, let me show you one. I forgot one. Flip the sentence. Here's how we flip the sentence. Notice long curved beaks is in the back side of the sentence. Well, we brought it to the front, right? The author states that, added the sentence starter, the long curved beaks of these fish-eating predators. So we basically flip that sentence around, which again helps to add that paraphrasing. Questions, comments, thoughts, anything? All right, Day, how about we talk a little bit about application?
So how can your students be applying this? Okay, first of all, as with everything we do in empowering writers, first we practice the skill in isolation. So we're going to model the skill for students. We're going to find examples. We'll read a passage. We'll assemble books on a particular a resource or a topic that we want to work on. And then we're going to have some time just practicing, taking notes. Somebody can read the passage out loud. I can actually model what my notes will look like. Then we're going to show them how we take those notes in conjunction with sentence starters, and I can translate those into fluid sentences. And just like you had said before, you're going to fill in the blanks, you're going to add more detail. That's what's going to make those sentences really flow. And then from there, we can build our paragraph. So think about this in all of your content areas in terms of when kids are going to have an opportunity to take notes. And don't underestimate the power of doing it orally at first. Having them listen and take notes is a different skill than actually having them, than just having them look at paper and take those notes. So we want them to be able to do it both ways so that they can apply this in content areas. And I think we have a question, Di.
We do. But before I answer Henry's question, there's something else I kind of want to circle back to. I want to circle back a little bit to the golden bricks, because here's the reality of the golden bricks. When kids are researching, what do they tend to do? They tend to just pick out any kind of information willy-nilly. They don't even know what it is that's important. Everything has equal importance, doesn't it? And that's why the golden bricks are so important here, because we want them to be looking for powerful information, not just any old information. Once they find that powerful information, I want them to be able to lift that out, take a note, use their sentence starters, paraphrase it, flip the sentence around, be able to add a word reference, because then the information that they're finding is so much more powerful than just plain old information that's out there, because not every sentence carries equal weight, does it? Henry, that's a great question. I love it. Is there a variation of why is it important? There absolutely is. As a matter of fact, I was working with a group of middle school teachers today, and they were talking about, in civics class, they were talking about change and how change is important, and we have to be the change we want to make, right? That was sort of the quote that the teacher was using to lead this discussion. And really, the question is this: why is change important? So there's always a way to insert your topic into that question. So what does change look like? Why is change important? Some of the other variations are sometimes ways that you're just going to tweak that question. What does it look like and why is it important? To work with the topic that you have. So if you're researching planets, what does Venus look like? Why is it important that it resides where it does or exists? Or why is it important that it's made up of this particular substance? So you can always add a little tiny twist to that, particularly in any of your science or social studies topics, for that reason, because it makes sense in the topic. Anyone else have any other questions about that as well? Day, you have any other answer for that?
No, I think that was great. We recently did, I was just trying to remember, Di, flipping through my notes of what webinar we just did that had, we went through the ways in which to expand. What does it look like? And why is it important to other subject areas?
Yeah.
And we had some examples in terms of how you would apply this. That was a really excellent question, Henry. And yes, those questions start out at the very basic form. And then we show kids in ways in which you can hold on to those questions, just like Di said, and then tweak them for your topic areas. If anybody actually has our Write About Science book, it was a book that we had out there for a while. And in our Write About Science, there's a lot of information on research and note-taking specific to science. And really, that's one of the things that we just want to sort of culminate with. The idea is that whatever techniques we teach you, they apply across that curriculum. So that these are the same research skills that you can use in social studies, in math. And what I always like about putting together these little webinars that relate specifically to topics is that we never have to dig beyond the skills we've been teaching our students as readers and as writers. And what ends up happening is the skills they have been using along the way have another purpose. So when what does it look like? Why is it important? Started for informational writing and easily segued it into how we can utilize it for research. Then it flips back to how do we get kids to use those same two questions to find evidence and to respond to text. So as you teach these techniques, keep in mind that they are always utilized both in reading and in writing. And it really allows our students to be able to just expand on those skills while using the same language, same assured experiences, and just show them how it branches off into other content areas. Any questions?
Henry has a follow-up. How do we get them to recognize important information in the text and in the video? So again, once you introduce them to the golden bricks, that's the kind of important information that you want them to be able to pluck and pull out of text. The other thing is to recognize what that key word might be. And that's a little harder sometimes for students. And I'm not sure what grade you teach, Henry, but depending on the grade you teach, we really need 4th and 5th. Yeah, those are perfect research age grades where kids really have to be able to find that key word. So what is this paragraph about? Well, if we go back to annotation and analysis, which is the very first skill we teach at Empowering Writers, students should be able to locate the main idea of a paragraph. That's a key word that they're going to need. Once they can locate that main idea, then what is the author saying about that particular main idea? Meaning, where are the details? Can I pick them out? And so that's another way of helping kids to start to see what's important. Not every word in the passage is important. So keywords, you're going to be able to pick those out as the details. And you want to make sure that they understand the main idea of a paragraph. If it's an article with headings, the heading is typically the main idea. If there's no heading, the author has probably inferred or embedded the main idea within the paragraph, and students have to be able to infer what that main idea might be based upon the information that they're reading.
So lots of times when we ask that question, why is it important? We always say to students, why is it important to your main idea? Because why is it important to your main idea is what's going to have them focus on, just like Di said, what's most important in that paragraph. Because otherwise they do want to include all these details, but they have to remember that we're always supporting whatever that main idea is. Any other questions? Good. Again, Di had said that if you happen to have our informational guide, this was in section 4 in the research section. Is that correct, Di? Is that?
Yes. So the two sections that we really sort of focused on. We focused on section number 3. Those are the detailed generating questions, the supporting details. Within that section of the informational guide, you're going to find information on paraphrasing, summarizing, and citing the evidence. That's where those sentence starters came from, that citing the evidence. Then we focused on section number 4, which is our research and golden brick section. And every one of the lessons that you see helps to scaffold that learning. Remember, what do we start with? Observation. Once we can observe, what are we looking for? Why is it important? That leads us to our research.
And we have a free trial. If anybody would like to go on, and you can access that 1-week free trial. It's in the hub. So that you can access that.